In the quiet village of Kijani, where red earth roads stretched between clay houses and tall mango trees, everyone knew Kofi Mensah as a hard-working man. He was not rich, but he was dependable for many years. He woke before sunrise, washed his face at the clay basin outside his home, and walked the dusty road toward the timber yard outside the village. His hands were rough and strong from lifting heavy logs onto trucks that traveled to the big city. The work was difficult, but Kofi never complained.
ElevenLabs on description.
He believed that as long as a man worked honestly, his family would never go hungry. His wife, Amma, often told neighbors she was proud of him. When women gathered near the village, filling metal buckets with water, she sometimes smiled and said, "My husband may not be rich, but he never fears hard work." They had been married for 7 years, and in a small village like Kijani, that meant something. People respected couples who stayed together through the early struggles of marriage. Their life was simple. Every morning, Amma cooked warm maize porridge while smoke rose from the small clay stove behind their house. Kofi ate quickly, then walked the road to the timber yard. Amma spent her mornings sweeping the yard, washing clothes, and preparing vegetables she later sold at the roadside market. In the evening, when the air cooled and the sky turned orange, Kofi returned home covered in dust, but always smiling. Sometimes he carried a small bundle of leftover wood from the yard. Sometimes he brought sweet oranges from the market. They would sit outside their house talking quietly, while children ran through the open field nearby and elders shared stories under the large baobab tree. For many years, life followed this peaceful rhythm. Everything changed one morning when Kofi arrived at the timber yard and saw a crowd of workers standing silently outside the locked gates. At first he thought the manager was late, but then he saw the paper notice hanging on the metal door. The company had closed, the timber yard had gone bankrupt, and all workers were dismissed. Immediately the men stood there staring at the notice. Some shook their heads, others cursed quietly. Kofi read the paper again, hoping he misunderstood something, but the message was clear. The yard would never reopen that afternoon. He walked home slowly, feeling heavier with every step. When he entered the yard, Amma looked up from the cooking pot and frowned. "Why are you home early?" she asked. Kofi sat on the wooden stool near the door and stared at the ground. "The timber yard is closed," he said quietly. "They say it will not open again for a moment." Amma said nothing. She walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and spoke gently. "Do not worry, Kofi, we will get through this together." Those words brought him comfort. He believed them completely. The next morning, Kofi woke even earlier than usual, determined to find another job. He walked to nearby farms, construction sites, and roadside markets, asking anyone who might need help, but jobs were rare. Many men had also lost work when the timber yard closed. Still, he continued searching. Each evening he returned, tired and dusty. Amma greeted him with encouraging words. "Do not lose hope," she would say. "Something good will come." Weeks passed, then months. Their small savings slowly disappeared. The bag of maize in their storage room grew lighter every week. Kofi began accepting small temporary jobs, carrying sacks of cassava, helping farmers repair fences, or clearing weeds from fields. The pay was never enough, but it kept them moving forward. During this time, Amma also began leaving home more often. She said she was helping her cousin sell vegetables in a nearby village. Sometimes she returned late after sunset, explaining the market had been busy. Kofi did not question her. After all, they both needed to work. But slowly he noticed small changes. Amma spoke less during dinner. She sometimes seemed distracted, as if her thoughts were somewhere else. When Kofi talked about his plans to find stable work, she simply nodded without enthusiasm. One afternoon, while standing near the village well, Kofi overheard two women whispering. They stopped talking when they saw him, but he still caught a few words. "Amma has been traveling to town again," one woman said quietly. The other replied, "I heard she met someone there." Kofi forced himself to ignore the gossip. Village rumors were common and often untrue. Still, the words stayed in his mind long after he walked away. A few weeks later, Kofi finally found temporary work helping an older farmer named Kwame harvest cassava.
ElevenLabs on description.
The work lasted several days, and though the pay was small, it felt like progress. When returned home carrying a small bag of rice, Amma smiled. "You see," she said, "things are already getting better." Kofi nodded. Something about her smile seemed different. It was polite but distant, like someone pretending to be happy. One evening after dinner, Amma told him she needed to travel early the next morning to help her cousin again. Kofi agreed, but that night's sleep refused to come. He lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the village. Crickets chirped endlessly somewhere in the darkness, and the soft wind rustled the mango leaves outside before sunrise AMA. Quietly prepared to leave, Kofi watched her from the doorway as she walked down the narrow path between houses. After she disappeared, he turned back inside the house. That was when he noticed something strange. Emma had left her cloth bag behind. She never forgot that bag. It carried her money, documents, and small personal things. Curious, Kofi opened it. Inside were folded clothes, a small purse, and a sealed envelope. First he assumed it was a market receipt or letter, but when he opened the envelope, his hands began to tremble. Inside were legal documents, divorce papers. Kofi stared at the pages, unable to understand what he was reading. Emma had already signed them. Alongside the papers were bus tickets dated 2 weeks later. The destination was the capital city, hundreds of kilometers away. For a long moment, Kofi could not move. His mind replayed the past months again and again, the late evenings, the secret trips to town, the distant expressions. Amma had already decided to leave. All this time she had been preparing quietly while telling him the same comforting words, "We will get through this together." When Amma returned that afternoon, she stopped suddenly when she saw Kofi sitting outside with the envelope resting on the table. The moment she saw the papers, her face turned pale. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Kofi lifted the documents slowly. "You were going to leave," he said quietly. Amma lowered her eyes. "I did not know how to tell you." Kofi felt a deep heaviness inside his chest. "You said you believed in mesh," sighed Kofi. "Things have changed." He waited for her explanation, but nothing she said made the truth easier. She spoke about opportunities in the city, about wanting a better life, about being tired of constant struggle. In the end, her words revealed something simple but painful. She had stopped believing in him. Maybe she had stopped loving him long before the timber yard closed. The following days were quiet and uncomfortable. Neighbors noticed the tension between them. In a village like Kijani, people quickly sensed when something was wrong. 2 weeks later, Emma left exactly as the bus ticket promised. Kofi stood beside the dusty road, watching the bus disappear into the distance. For a long time he remained there, staring at the empty road. Many villagers believed Kofi would never recover. Some expected him to leave Kijani and search for work in the city, but life took a different path. A farmer, Kwame, who had hired him during the cassava harvest, later offered him a permanent job managing part of the farmland. The work was steady, and slowly Kofi regained his confidence. Months later, he stood again in the same courtyard where he once held the divorce papers. Children ran through the open field nearby. Women laughed while drawing water from the well, and smoke rose from cooking fires. Across the village, life had continued. Sometimes neighbors asked him about Emma. Kofi never spoke badly about her. Instead, it shared a lesson many people remembered. Some people promise to stand beside you when life is easy, but the truth about love only appears when life becomes difficult. And in the quiet village of Kijani, that lesson traveled farther than any rumor ever could.